It's like streamline. No. It's rough.
Maybe, yeah, all of it.
It's the immediate medical care along with the swelling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, Nacho Average Uses for Google Forms. If you haven't already, go ahead and grab the slide deck using the QR code or the bit.ly. It's bit.ly/Nacho Average Form. And the A and the F are all case sensitive. We will have a couple of interactive parts to our session today. So if you are able to, go ahead and access the slide deck. Again, one more time, bit.ly/Nacho Average Form. Hi, everybody. I am Julie Beasley. I am a fourth-year chemistry teacher at Spotsylvania High School in Spotsylvania, Virginia. I started teaching with Katrina as my mentor, so ed tech was kind of established at a very early age, I guess you can say. So I have lots of badges that go along with my name and my title, but I'm a Google Level 2 certified educator as well. My name is Katrina Stafford. I'm a former educator, former ITRT, currently the LMS administrator for ISTE, and I come to you today as a Google for Education certified trainer. Google Forms is obviously not the new tool on the block, right? It's been around since 2008, and it actually started as a Sheets feature way back then. But since then, millions of people have created and filled out Google Forms. So what I want to know is how you or teachers in your building or other colleagues are using Google Forms currently. So just shout it out, raise your hand. How are you currently using Forms?
Sign up for ITRT meetings.
Signing up for meetings, perfect.
Homecoming voting.
Yeah, good, good. Sounds like our presentation right here. Okay, back here.
Digital breakouts.
Okay,
Oh my
we're coming in trouble.
Slides already.
Tickets and when we do our own version of this, our little in-house tech summit, that's how they register for sessions.
Awesome. Well, we're going to show you how to do all that again. What I expected you to say are things like surveys, assessments, quizzes, some of that teacher level implementation in the classroom, but that's okay. Hopefully you'll still get some new information today. So what we're going to take are those sort of familiar base uses of Google Forms from this sort of Nacho to this, right? Who doesn't want that? Maybe perfect. All right, go ahead.
And so there are 3 toppings that we can add to the simple Google Forms. The first is just new ways to use Google Forms that you or your teachers may not be accustomed to using them as. The second is to use already built-in features that are already in Forms that don't require a teacher to add anything to it, and it's very easy to use. And then the third are add-ons that add that new functionality to Forms. So first we're going to start with just new ways to use Forms for everyday tasks. So as a teacher, man, I realized that students turned in late work a lot, and I was a bit surprised, and it was also a little bit cumbersome to keep up with it as a teacher, especially when Google Forms don't sync. At the time it was to Google Classroom, they didn't sync, but they don't sync to Canvas, which is what most of us are using now. So what I created was a simple grade update request. It's just a very easy to use Google form. And I post this link on my Canvas homepage, but it could be used in Google Classroom or any other LMS as well. So I just have students fill out their name, what block they're in, and then what assignment they've completed. Now, what I really like about this is I use the spreadsheet to track once I've graded it. So last night, this is not my real students, but last night as I was gone, they thankfully took the opportunity to get some of their work done. And I had quite a few that I needed to go through. Once I have graded it and put it in our management system for grades, I just typically highlight the cells like you see here, but you could also use a checkbox or something other than that. So I think this would be really useful for teachers if you created a template of any of these that are a little more classroom-based. You could certainly send a forced copy link to your teachers, and that would probably be helpful as well. And a pro tip here, so I forgot to mention our general layout. So up at the top, you'll see the template link for all of our ideas that we've come up with, some information about it, and then a pro tip is just an extension for that. So what I have done is in responses on my grade update request, in the 3 dots, have it send an email to me when there's a new response. So I don't check this every day. I don't have time for that. Your teachers don't either. So this sends me just an email alert for when I need to check it. Now, bathrooms have also been quite the adventure this year, as most of you who are in a school building probably know. My school doesn't have a fancy e-pass system, so I found that a Google form works just as well. This can also be used as a check-in or check-out of any type. So if this is a library, check-in, check-out, teachers leaving the building, check-in or out, the same idea applies. It's also really good for contact tracing. For mine, I have students fill out their first, last name, their block. I have them fill it out when they come in and when they leave the classroom. That way I know how long they're gone, how often they go. And also if I need information for contact tracing. You know, if they went to the library during second block, I know that information. I can easily give it to my admin. My pro tip here would be to use the Share-O, as I've recently learned it to be called, in Chrome to make a QR code. Now you're gonna wanna make the QR code for the preview link. That way when students scan that code, it prompts them to fill it out. And this could be printed on a physical pass if your students still need a pass in the hallway. One teacher at my school has it printed and then on the back it's laminated and they just write the time that they left. That way if someone stops them in the hallway, they know when they left the classroom.
In my former role as an ITRT, I was asked pretty often, especially as the pandemic came on, to help with digital or virtual elections and students voting on everything from spirit days to senior trips to even like student and teacher of the month. So I'm sure you're like, I already know how to create a ballot, and I'm positive that is true. But in my template, I wanted to show you a couple of things. Obviously, I'm going to use sections to sort of break it up. And one of the reasons I use sections is so that I can include a question or a password. So there's a couple of different ways you can layer security into your ballot. The first would be to restrict the form to your district or your organization, right? So that's one level. So that way outsiders or external emails can't access it. But if you were trying to hold an election for a specific grade level or a certain class or even further down than that, you can create a password question. And you could use response validation to make sure that that password is correct in order for the person filling it out to move forward. And we'll talk about response validation later, so I'm not going to get into that too much. And then the second section, once they can get past the password, is your questions for whatever they're voting on. So in this case, it's officers for president, vice president, and one other. A pro tip here would be to not recreate the summary charts. So if you're posting the results of your election to a slide deck, to a website, to an email, just grab these charts right here, because when you use the copy next to each one right here, it brings over the title of the graph, this part, the key, and the graph itself. So there's no need to recreate the wheel there in Sheets when Forms does that for you. Two years ago here at Vista in Roanoke, I was sitting next to somebody in a session just like you guys are, but closer because that was pre-COVID. And I saw her filling out a Google Slides template. So she was taking notes in a template she had created, and it had a session title and a link for resources and different spots in the slide to take notes during sessions. And I thought that was a great idea, but I think Forms is the better tool than Slides. And I've even seen some docs, during Vista this time, to each their own, but I really think that Google Forms does a great job of providing that space as well. So I provided you with a template now that we're at the end of conference, right? Maybe next year, right? But you could also adapt this to faculty meetings or any kind of the reoccurring meeting or review of presentations, or there's lots of different ways to adapt this form. But the same thing that you're probably typing in your notes document or in your slide, session title, link to resources, notes. My pro tip here is to grab that view form link, share that with the team that you're here with the others from your school district or from your organization. And you guys can all fill this out for each of your sessions, and it's going to compile in the same spreadsheet, right? So when you get back and you debrief or on the way home, you can talk about all the different sessions that you've attended, and you have all that information in one spot. Also, if you're sharing a document or a slide deck with your colleagues to take notes, you may run into the issue of typing over one another, or somebody moved my slide, all right? So for the control freaks out there like me, the Google form provides a great alternative to those other options.
So another thing that I have to do as a classroom teacher that all of your teachers are doing, and maybe even some of you, depending on your role, are probably doing as well, is you're contacting someone. For me, it's mostly parents. For you, maybe it's new teachers, or if you have mentor teachers, they're meeting with their provisionally licensed teachers. If you're an admin, you're contacting teachers. So I had a major issue, especially when we shut down for the pandemic, getting back all those paper logs that I had in my classroom of, what was that phone number that I called Joey's mom on, or, oh, what was that email? Because I know it wasn't the one from Synergy. So to get rid of that issue from ever happening to me again, I created a parent contact log. Now, like the last form, the difference here is not that it's really has a new question type or anything significant, but this is a form that you're making for yourself to fill out. So again, we typically make forms with the user in mind. So I'm sending a quiz to my kids or a survey, but this one I created for myself. So my parent contact log looks like this from the edit view. And I just put typical questions that I would want to log. So the student's name, their last name, for me, what block they're in. I also like to keep a record of the date and time of contact. Now with the bathroom pass, I don't ask these questions to my students because it automatically timestamps it. But these sometimes I fill out a little later. If I have a couple emails back and forth, I like to just summarize it by filling this out once. But if you are on top of it, maybe you don't need those questions. And I can contact parents via email. We have Synergy, so I list that as an option, phone, in person, and then I just put a description here for my contact so that I know. Now, instead of using responses, I tend to look at the spreadsheet, and then I can sort that by student name. That way I can say, all right, well, this is kind of the evolution of my, we've been working with Johnny on his test, and, this has kind of been the back and forth. Now, my pro tip here is to save the preview mode to your bookmarks bar. That way it's really easy for teachers to use. And again, as a classroom teacher, uniformity is really helpful for me. So if you gave this link to, or gave a template like this to your teachers and they were all using it, think about how great it would be for me to just email the teacher across the hall and say, hey, have you talked to John's mom? I've been having these issues. And they could just reference, they could even copy paste their responses into an email back. So just uniformity from the top down is super helpful for me as a teacher. All right, so now we're going to move on to some more advanced features that are already inherent to Google Forms. So the first one we're going to talk about is response validation. So what I want you guys to do is kind of to see what response validation looks like from the student point of view. Okay, so if you click the link in the tablet there, it'll take you to just a short little quiz. Some questions about VISTE. The first one is about math. So I apologize if it's been a while since you were in algebra class.
Let's just take the next 2 minutes and play around with what you see in this form as response validation, and then we'll come back together and talk about it.
Yep.
That one.
I know. also teach chemistry.
Oh,
So
yay.
I was curious about your, going with the graduated cylinder. You're not able to set parameters for the level of
We're gonna talk
uncertainty.
about
Yeah, so that's,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that's one of the ones I do.
Okay.
It's hard to see, I have to teach my kids how to zoom in like
Mhm.
mega because
Yeah.
they're just always
same.
so small, yeah. And I love it for things like gas laws too.
Mhm.
And if you email me, I can send you that one too.
Oh,
But
sure.
it's so nice with the calculations that you can give that hint.
Yeah, I
Such a
noticed that
time
because I said like 76.2 or something. It was like,
Yeah.
make sure you have one.
Yeah, I think if
decimal
it's
pick.
76.3, I think it's my
0.3,
threshold, yeah. Alright, so let's take a look at this. So you notice that if you maybe don't have good vision on the last one, or maybe if you don't remember the correct candy for Visti, you notice the little red text box that appeared that said try again, and then it told you some information about it. That's what response validation is. So it ensures that students get the correct answer. So when teachers include response validation, or like Katrina mentioned earlier, you could even put this with that, what was it? Oh, the student voting and the passwords. It requires someone to get a correct answer. So gone are the days where students submit the whole Google form only to find out they got all of them wrong, or they got half of them wrong. So it's giving students instantaneous feedback, while also as us as teachers, once they submit it, it's a 100. That's so much easier to put in the grade book than like a 62 or a 73 or anything like that. So how we set up response validation, and when you click the template link in the slides, it will take you to the edit version of it, is there are a couple different options for response validation. So to get it in the form or for the question, after you've created it, you click the 3 dots and then response validation. Now there are a couple different options. There's number, text, length, and regular expression. So this really works well for any content area. As a chemistry teacher, a lot of times they're typing in a numerical answer. So I tend to use number most often. But even with number, there are lots of different options. So if your math teachers are doing inequalities, I think is what they are. Excuse me, I'm not a math teacher. So if they're doing inequalities and students can have any number greater than something or less than, that's an option too. Even if you have a range, so in chemistry, on the last one, we read graduated cylinders, which they also do in 3rd grade. So this is applicable really to any grade level. I've allowed it, instead of doing an exact number, I've set a range. So anywhere between 76.3 and 76.6. Now, our second one was a word answer. So I clicked text, and then I wanted it to contain M&Ms. Now, the way you saw that red text appear that said try again, and then it gave you a hint, that's my pro tip. Make good use of that space. Also tell your teachers to make good use of that space because, oh, God bless first year teacher Julie. When I first did a response validation and it just kept saying try again, all my kids would come up to me, they'd be like, it just says I'm wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, and I'd give them a hint. I could save myself so much time by just giving them that hint up front. So this could be something like, do the same to both sides. Maybe it says, look at page 2 in your notes. If you have virtual students, look at minute 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the video. It could even be a link to a YouTube video that you may find helpful. So make good use of that. Now, someone also said that they use it for breakout boxes or escape rooms. I also love those activities. Teachers, I think, generally love those activities too, but sometimes we're limited by the physical boxes, and I hate when that happens, especially when you have students being in quarantine and you still want them to be able to participate. So doing a virtual breakout box is super easy with Google Forms. So different lock types that we tend to see, again, this is not necessarily a one and all substitution for the game, but lots of games that you'll find can be applied with this. So if you have a letter lock, if they need to have a word typed in, you would just set the response validation. I would suggest regular expression for this. Now, the reason I do regular expression is because when you do text, it only gives you the option to contain or not contain. So on the last one, if you had typed M and M with 10 S's, it would have marked it as okay. This, I want it to be exactly VSTE, so I set it as a regular expression that matches. You could also do this with text as well, or with numbers. I tend to just use numbers for numbers. For arrow locks, obviously, there's not a way students can type a little up arrow or a little down arrow. So just getting creative, U for up, D for down, regular expression works great. And then, like I said before, numbers, I chose number here to be equal to, but you could do regular expression as well.
So my favorite advanced feature in Google Forms, it's already kind of native to Google Forms, is branching. I love sort of creating that pathway and distinguishing different routes for our form filler outers to complete. So I want you guys to experience that as well. So you're going to click the form here in the tablet, and it's going to take you to a choose your own adventure. We're going to spend 2 minutes for you to go through your adventure, and then we'll come back together and talk about it.
Use that. If you have anything here to just see it.
All right, is anybody familiar with Google Applied Digital Skills or have used it in your buildings? Right, so I was actually inspired by a lesson inside Google Applied Digital Skills. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a warehouse of lessons from Google that helps students learn more about the Google tools. So there's lessons for sheets and for slides and docs, all kinds of things that they can create. So check it out if you haven't already. And I've got the link directly to the Choose Your Own Adventure lesson if you want to check that out later. But the Choose Your Own Adventure inside Google Applied Digital Skills is using Google Slides. And just like the Vista conference form, it works there and it's great. But I find it, I like it better inside Google Forms because of the branching ability. So to set up branching inside a Google form, you need 2 things. You have to have lots of sections, right? You need to create sections. That's what creates the ability to go to different places. So you have different sections, and that button is right here. But for each section in the Choose My Own Adventure, I've got 1 question, and it's a multiple choice question. Now, if you were just branching at the end of a question and it doesn't matter what they choose, we could determine a destination or a section here at the bottom of the question. But that's not what we want in this case. In this case, we need it to go based on an answer. So you need to select that by going to the 3 dots in the question, and you would have to do this for each question. And check the box that says go to section based on answer. That populates this area where I can choose which section I'm going to send my learner to after they've selected that option. In the last session we did, one of our attendees suggested that sometimes it can be difficult to map that out here in Google Forms and to maybe draw it out somewhere else first, create sort of your own storyline elsewhere and then bring it into Google Forms. I think that's great because she's right. Once you start creating all of these sections, if you name them all the same like I did, it becomes difficult to determine which one you want it to map to, right? So my pro tip here is to add images. I'm a visual learner, and so reading things without pictures is less engaging for me. So I tried to add a visual element here. And the other pro tip I wanted to share is that we don't have to be the only creators of content, especially in Google Forms. Students can do this. I mean, I come from the secondary classroom, so I know high school students can do it, but I think even younger than that as well. So they can create a choose your own adventure, because choose your own adventure spans any curriculum, right? You can adapt any story, any lesson into a choose your own adventure. And it's also going to capture all of the 5 C's. So it's really, truly a great lesson, whether you're using it here in Google Forms or in Google Slides. The other fun thing about it was probably the person closest to you didn't have the same adventure. So I'm assuming some of you guys ran off with cupcakes, and some of you were good people who told the store owner. So it's just fun, something to talk about and debrief afterwards. So it creates, also that sense of community as well. All right, and then as an ITRT formerly, I was asked to track, but also award PD points at the end of the year. There are a couple different ways you can track PD points in Google Forms. The first way would be just to have a form for attendance. That's a simpler way short term, but maybe more difficult long term, because then you have to tally the points. And the alternative would be just to collect that information at the end of the year before you generate a certificate. Actually, you know what?
I was wondering.
Girl, you should have stopped me. Back it up, y'all. PD signups, not PD certificates. We'll get to certificates in just a minute. So sorry. PD signups.
You can tell it's like almost 2:00
Yeah.
on a Thursday, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys. Let's talk about PD signups, not PD certificates. Either way, as an ITRT, I was also in charge of getting teachers to sign up for professional development sessions, right? And because our district had sessions for specific departments or even to specific schools, I created a Google form that allowed them to customize their schedule and their choices in a Google form using branching. So this template in the first question needs to have a question that's going to send them on their pathway through branching. So my question was department, because this was just for my building. You could also make it buildings if it was for division PD, or you could also narrow it down by topic. What do you want to learn, and then branch from there. So lots of adaptations here. And then I've got several sections, because again, that's the requirement of branching. So if you had a required session for math, throw it here so that when they choose their department, it directs them right here to sign up for that session. And then you can have a section that lists all the sessions that are required for everybody, so that once they get their department-specific session, they move on to the one that's required for everybody. And then finally, in this template, you'll see a checkbox question that they can choose as many as they want to get to a certain number of hours, or just build on what they already know, or maybe they didn't see one before that they liked, they can choose additional ones here. My pro tip here would be to change 2 settings under responses. You want to allow your teachers to edit their submission after they've turned it in, or after they've hit submit, because how many times have you created a schedule that's changed afterward, right? So sessions, even here at Visti, sessions get added, sessions get removed. So you need to give your teacher the flexibility to change their schedule based on cancellations and additions. So allow response editing, that toggle is here. And then also you want to allow or have it send a copy of their responses to their email, so that they have a copy of their customized schedule, because it's not the same as everybody else they may know. And then on that PD day, they know exactly where to go and when.
So now we're going to talk about the spiciest topping you can put on your nacho, which are add-ons. So add-ons are very similar to Chrome extensions if you're not familiar with it. They just add a new functionality to Google Forms. So the first one we're going to talk about is Choice Eliminator. And it took me a while to try and think of a definition of Choice Eliminator that didn't involve eliminating choices. So I finally came up with one. It is an add-on that removes values after the choice has been selected a certain number of times. We're not going to have time to get into all the details of each add-on, so we have linked video tutorials for both of the ones we're going to talk about in depth here. But to get an add-on, the video was a little too long for a GIF. You just go to the 3 dots, then the puzzle piece, and that takes you to the marketplace. You type in which add-on you would like. Here I chose Choice Eliminator. There are 2 options for Choice Eliminator. There's the light version and Choice Eliminator 2. I feel like Choice Eliminator 2 isn't really any more difficult to use, and it has a little more functionality than the light version. Both of them are free, so I don't know why the light, but all right. So I used it specifically for parent-teacher conference signups, but again, these are applicable really to any type of signup. So how I have set this up, since my school doesn't have a system or necessarily a set way, I think this would really be helpful if ITRTs could make a copy of this or make your own that's specific for your school and then send out that forced copy link to teachers. Again, that way there's uniformity, prevents teachers from using Google Calendar for one class, forms for another, just email, call, when you have parents that have 2 kids in a high school where they each have 8 classes, that's 16 teachers to keep in contact with. So scheduling parent-teacher conferences without a uniform setup can be stressful, and if we don't make it easy for parents, just like students, they're not likely to do it. So I tried to come up with the easiest thing. So here I just asked for the parent name, Julie, and my student name, John, and I put in my available conference time. So what happens is when a parent selects, say they do the 120, the other part of this that I added and kind of my pro tip here is to also include branching with it. So because we have different types of conferences, they could do in-person, Google Meet, or phone. So I gave them different options. So if they selected Google Meet, it takes them to a section that asks for a good email address. If they clicked phone, it would ask them their phone number. I'll just click in person, and then I ask if there's anything they want to talk about, like grades, and submit. So now, 45 minutes later, another parent clicks the link, and you'll notice that that 120 option is gone. So there is no double booking. This takes care of that for you. And again, I know there are other apps or websites out there that will do similar things. Teachers are familiar with Google Forms. The less things that we as teachers, and I'm pretty tech savvy, but even sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to learn another thing for this one particular use. If we give them a Google form that they're already accustomed to, they know how to get the spreadsheet to, they can see the responses, it just makes it easier.
You can also, with Choice Eliminator, set it to eliminate a choice after it's been chosen a certain number of times.
And that's my next point. See, you guys I think you all are looking at the slides ahead of time. So the other option with Choice Eliminator, so another thing we have at my school is remediation time. So my second template has dates that they can come. So I don't like to pull students more than like 5 at a time because I just feel like I can't give them enough attention. So I have set Choice Eliminator in the second form to eliminate a response after 5 times. We did Health and Fitness Week at our previous school, and we could have 10 students playing basketball. We could have 50 walking the track. We could have 2 playing tennis. So it also doesn't have to be the exact same amount for every option. It can be, 5, 10, and then 100 for the next one if you wanted to.
Is Choice Eliminator or some sort of add-on like that, is it form specific, or if I add that, is it gonna be there for all my forms?
You have to configure it for each form that you want to apply it to.
Okay,
So you can add the add-on, but you would still have to click the puzzle piece to configure for that specific form.
got it.
And your teachers, if you send out like a forced copy link for parent-teacher, I would also include just a short video tutorial on how they can set it up, because it won't, like when you make a copy, it's not gonna automatically put in Choice Eliminator. You have to configure that for the form.
So the add-on that I'm going to talk about is Autocrat. How many of you are familiar with Autocrat? Good, awesome. It's an add-on. It's actually for sheets, right? It's not for forms. But the thing is, the information that we gather through Google Forms goes to a Google Sheet. And Autocrat is going to take that information in the sheet and build a PDF or a document or even an email that merges those fields from the form that you've mapped. So we don't have time to go through, I'm not going to handhold you through Autocrat because your use case and mine are probably totally different, and it's pretty lengthy. There are a lot of customization options with Autocrat. So in the GIF here, I've shown you how to get Autocrat in Sheets. And I've linked the video tutorial, but like I said, not going to walk you through it today, but please check it out if you haven't already. All right, now let's talk about PD certificates. So again, you can collect that information one of 2 ways, either each session or at the end of the year. The template I've provided you does the end of the year collection. So their email, first and last name. I have them check the boxes for the PD sessions that they've attended, but again, this template's from 2 years ago when we were still doing everything face-to-face. If this was for asynchronous training, you may set it up differently. But the final question is where I collect their total number of hours. And this is on the honor system, but I mean, you could go back and verify if you wanted to, if you had time. That's great. So again, this information collected goes into Sheets. I set up Autocrat. It sends it into a certificate that I've created in Canva. I feel like I've heard Canva 50 times here at Misty today, or Misty this weekend. Canva's everywhere, right? So I would highly recommend that you use it for creating certificates as well. So once you create that certificate, you add those merge field placeholders with first name and last name, and the total number of hours, and Autocrat will merge those fields into the certificate template you provide. So in this case, I've brought in first name, last name, total number of PD points. What I love about Autocrat is that it placed a copy of each certificate in a folder in my drive, but it also shared the certificate with the receiving teacher so that they have a copy in their drive. So when they are up for recertification 9 years from now, they can go back in their drive and find that certificate, or you can as well. All right, whether you're an admin, ITRT, or just instructional leadership, classroom observations are a way of life, even now. So I created a template for you to easily document what you see during those classroom observations. Again, it's not news to you what you're collecting. What might be the new part, again, is the Autocrat feature. For this use case, Autocrat would be used to generate the email to the teacher. So what I would map would be just certain fields that I collected during the observation. Maybe things that went well, things that didn't. Do you want a follow-up meeting? Some of that. My pro tip here is that you don't have to map every field. You don't have to send all of this in the email that goes to the teacher. Some of it might be internal notes. Some of it might be just for your admins. So you may not want to map every field in your Autocrat process. So be selective so that the teacher only gets the information that's helpful or relevant to them. All right, so some add-ons that we just don't have time to talk about. I wish we did. Check it out. Provides a way for responses of a question to update based on whether something has been checked in or checked out. And so it will, if you check out a computer from me, it removes that response from the question, and when you check it back in, it automatically puts it back. So check it out as an additional add-on. Dynamic fields. Typically, we think of data from forms to go into Sheets, and it's unidirectional, right? It only goes one way. With dynamic fields, you can take what you have in Sheets and make it your responses inside Google Forms. So it provides a pathway back. And if you change a value in Sheets, it will update in Google Forms. So maybe you have a list of teachers in your building, and as that changes, your responses would change for your classroom observation list. And the third one here is form limiter. How many people have forgotten to stop accepting responses on a form? Guilty as charged, right? And especially if it's like the use case we talked about earlier with ballots and you don't want those submissions after a specific date, form limiter can really help you out because you can preset that date and time or maximum number of responses where you want it to stop. Other add-ons that you guys are using that we didn't mention here? Do you guys have any? Any add-ons? No? Yeah, there's tons out there, and like I said, the marketplace has a lot. I did see one for like notifications that they can email you after a certain number of responses, whereas you don't have quite that freedom inside forms. So check out add-ons. Here we've listed some additional resources. If you go back and you have some teachers who aren't familiar with forms maybe as much, you can send them to the Google Learning Center for training and some simple cheat sheets. I'm a huge Casey Bell fan and Matt Miller, so I've listed their archive libraries here of Google Form help tutorials and podcasts and other resources. And then if you're looking for something a little more advanced, you can integrate forms into Slack and Asana and so many other programs using Zapier. It's kind of the gamut of resources here. Before we finish up, I want to see, I know at the beginning you guys talked about the way that you're using forms and we included a lot of them. Are there any that you're using that we didn't talk about here that you might want to share out for other people to use?
So shout out at once, everybody.
You want to talk about your discipline example that you told us?
Yeah, we actually several years ago started using Google Forms to create our discipline referrals through each of our schools within our district. And we use an extension or an add-on for Google Forms called Form Publisher that works a lot like AutoCrad. It doesn't work off the Google Sheet side. It works actually within the form itself, pulls the data, puts that data into a mail merge document that's then emailed to the individual principals of the building. So that when a teacher fills it out, it automatically generates a document that goes to the principal so that they have an actual physical document in hand by the time the student comes down to the office.
Right, yeah, I thought of another use too. When we talked about contact tracing earlier, you could have the nurse fill out a form that lets teachers know when a student has been identified for quarantine or for other health concerns. So many use cases for forms. Again, we hope you found something new today. We've listed our emails on kstafford@isd.org if you have questions.
And I'm JL Beasley at spotsylvania.k12.va.us. Just copy, paste it, don't try and remember it. And there is a little L in there that's hidden. Otherwise, you'll get someone at the bus garage, so they can't help you with forms. But thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to hang around, or if you have anything we didn't talk about, we'd love to chat about forms with you. Hope you had a good busy.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you next year.